They say her efforts to write steamy blockbusters fell short of the mark.
My father also gave me some very good advice about showbiz.
For years, the world saw the diamonds, the shoulder pads, and the sharp one-liners. What they didn't see was a mother sitting beside a hospital bed, being told to prepare for the worst. Joan Collins had everything fame could offer. Then, in a single moment, none of it mattered. Her 8-year-old daughter lay in a coma, and the doctors had already given up hope. What Joan did next, and what she refused to accept, says more about her than any role ever could. This is the part of her story the cameras never showed, and it will stay with you. A child of the Blitz. Long before the mansions, the cameras, and the famous roles, Joan Henrietta Collins was a little girl trying to sleep while bombs fell over London. She was born on May 23, 1933, in Paddington, London. She was the oldest child of Joseph Collins, a South African-born theatrical agent whose clients would later include Shirley Bassey, Tom Jones, and the Beatles, and Elsa, a dance teacher. From the beginning, people noticed how striking she was. Her mother is said to have pinned a sign to her pram that read, "Please do not kiss me," just to stop strangers from fussing over her. It was an early sign of something that would stay with her for years. Her beauty opened doors, but it also trapped her in ways people rarely understood. Then, the war changed everything. During the Blitz of 1940 and 1941, German bombs fell across London, and Joan's childhood became unsettled and uncertain. She and her sister Jackie were sent away again and again, moved by their father from one place to another, including Chichester, Bognor, Brighton, and Norfolk. They never stayed anywhere for long. Because of that, their schooling was broken up, and any real sense of safety kept slipping away. When the family was back in London, they sometimes slept in the underground at Marble Arch Station. Families crowded together there, and even in the middle of fear, people tried to hold on to some spirit. Neighbors brought accordions. People sang through the air raids. Everyone was trying to make the night feel less frightening. By the time Victory in Europe Day came on May 8, 1945, Joan was almost 12. She remembered driving through a city bursting with relief and joy. The streets were packed. People danced, kissed, waved Union Jacks, and climbed lampposts. After years of fear, London finally breathed again. At home, Joan was the eldest of 3 children. Jackie would go on to become one of the best-selling novelists in the world, and their brother Bill completed the family. Their father, Joseph, brought a hard edge into the household. He was often distant, and his Jewish South African roots, along with his place in the entertainment world, gave family life a glamorous feel, but also a demanding one. Their mother, Elsa, brought warmth and softness. Between them, Joan grew up in a world that was stylish on the outside and strict underneath. Those early years left a mark on her. Living through danger, upheaval, and constant disruption gave her a toughness that never really left. She learned early that fear did not stop life from moving, so you had to keep going with it. Years later, she spoke with her usual blunt honesty about how many modern actors seem to describe terrible childhoods and abuse, while her generation simply endured what came and carried on. That way of thinking began in wartime shelters and on restless journeys from town to town. In time, life would test it in ways even that young girl could never have imagined. Britain's Bad Girl and the climb to Hollywood. With her father working in show business, acting was never far away. Joan was drawn to it early, and at 13 she made her stage debut in a 1946 production of A Doll's House by Ibsen. Not long after, at just 15, she entered the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. That alone showed how quickly her path was forming. By 17, she had signed with the Rank organization, and during the early 1950s, she began working steadily in British films. Audiences noticed her beauty straight away, but they also noticed something else. She had a look that suggested danger, confidence, and mystery. Before long, The tabloids gave her the nickname Britain's Bad Girl. It stayed with her for decades and helped build the image that followed her everywhere. Then Hollywood noticed too. In 1955, the famous director Howard Hawks cast her as Princess Nellifer in Land of the Pharaohs. The role was sly, glamorous, and treacherous. Exactly the kind of part she would later make unforgettable. It also gave her a real opening in America. After that, her career kept moving through some of the biggest names and biggest productions of the era. She appeared in The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, in a role that Marilyn Monroe had once been considered for. Monroe was 29 at the time and judged too old to play the teenage Evelyn Nesbit. That detail stayed telling because it showed how harshly Hollywood measured women by age. Years later, Joan Collins would outlast that logic in spectacular fashion. She also stepped into a role Joan Crawford had left in The Opposite Sex, starred in the 1957 box office success Island in the Sun, and appeared opposite Bing Crosby and Bob Hope in The Road to Hong Kong in 1962. Then, in 1967, she took part in what many fans and critics still see as the finest episode of the original Star Trek, The City on the Edge of Forever. She played Edith Keeler, the warm and tragic woman Captain Kirk falls in love with. By then, she was no longer just a British actress doing well abroad. She was a real star on both sides of the Atlantic. Yet, while her career kept rising, her private life was becoming harder, messier, and far more painful. Success and heartbreak kept arriving close together, and that pattern started earlier than most people knew. In fact, one of the darkest experiences of her life came at the very beginning, and she would carry it quietly for many years. The darkest chapter, Maxwell Reed. The most troubling chapter of Joan Collins's life began when she was still very young. For years, she barely spoke about it. At 17, still innocent by her own account, and raised in a time with no real sex education, she went on a date with the Irish actor Maxwell Reed. He was older, already established, and more than a decade senior to her. Back at his apartment, she later said, he put something in her drink and raped her. It was her first sexual experience, and it happened while she was drugged and unable to protect herself. What followed showed how harshly that era treated young women, and how deeply shame could shape their choices. Joan did not go to the police. She did not run from him either. Instead, burdened by guilt and by the beliefs she had grown up with, she kept seeing him for several months. She later explained that in those days, if a woman had sex, people expected marriage to follow. That thinking stayed with her, and when Reed proposed, she agreed. They married at Caxton Hall in London on May 24, 1952. She was 19, he was 33. The marriage quickly became miserable. It was degrading, hurtful, and deeply wrong from the start. Joan later said that Reed once tried to arrange for her to spend a night with another wealthy man in exchange for money, treating her as though she were something to be traded. In time, she left him. They separated and divorced in 1956, and she would later describe him clearly as the worst of her 5 husbands. Even so, the fact that she survived those years and still built such a full and successful life says a great deal about her strength. The wound did not disappear, though. It stayed with her and affected how she saw men, love, and her own value for a long time. Only in her 80s did she begin speaking about it openly, including in the BBC documentary This Is Joan Collins, and in frank interviews with major newspapers and broadcasters. Like many women of her generation, she found the words much later in life. She also made one thing clear: none of it was her fault. She had simply been a naive teenager on a date with a famous older man. When she finally looked back on escaping him, her response was pure Joan. She got rid of him, and she moved on. This section describes sexual assault, Warren Beatty, Anthony Newley, and a heartbreak. She rarely discusses, as the 1950s gave way to the 1960s, Joan Collins's love life began to look like a Hollywood story from the outside. Inside it, there was far more pain than glamour. She dated Sidney Chaplin, the son of Charlie Chaplin, and then began a passionate and very public romance with Warren Beatty in 1959, before he became a major star. Their relationship drew attention fast. By 1960, they were engaged. Still, the relationship ended badly in 1961 after his infidelity. During that time, Joan also had an abortion, something she later spoke about with unusual honesty, especially considering how taboo it was then. She described the circumstances as difficult and painful. Beatty later brushed off their engagement as an exaggeration, a cold remark that stood in sharp contrast to what had clearly been a serious heartbreak for her. Then life moved forward again. In 1963, while 5 months pregnant, she married Anthony Newley in Connecticut. He was her second husband and a gifted singer, songwriter, and actor. Together they had 2 children. Their daughter Tara was born in October 1963, and their son Alexander, known as Sasha, was born in September 1965. For a while, they looked like a dazzling show business couple, moving through fame and family life at once. But appearances could not hold the marriage together. Newley's repeated affairs damaged the relationship deeply, and after 2 years of separation, they divorced in 1971. Joan had not yet turned 40, yet she had already lived through 2 broken marriages. One began in trauma and shame. The second ended in betrayal. Even so, another ordeal was still waiting for her, and it would reach far deeper than anything a husband had done. I was told she was going to die, the accident that shattered everything. In 1972, Joan married her third husband, the American businessman and former Apple Records executive Ron Cass. That same June, they welcomed a daughter, Tatiana, known as Katie. For a time, life seemed to be opening into a new chapter. Then, in 1980, everything changed. Katie was 8 years old when she was hit by a car and suffered devastating head and brain injuries. She fell into a coma that lasted 42 days. Doctors gave Joan the kind of news no parent ever forgets. They told her her daughter was going to die. Years later, when she spoke about it in her documentary, her words were simple and painful. Katie had been knocked down. Her injuries were extremely serious. She lay in a coma for what felt endless. Joan was told to prepare for the worst. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Fame, beauty, money, status, all of it disappeared beside a hospital bed, where a child might never wake up. But Katie did wake up. Against the expectations of the doctors, she survived. Her recovery was slow, difficult, and demanding. It took patience, strength, and years of rehabilitation. Yet little by little she came back to her family. Joan never stopped feeling grateful for that. During that period, she put much of her career aside and focused herself on her daughter's healing. She refused to accept the finality of the doctor's verdict, and that refusal became part of the fight that followed. The strain of the ordeal spread through the rest of her life. Her marriage to Ron Cass was already under pressure, and the trauma around Katie's accident made it even harder to bear. At the same time, Cass was sinking deeper into addiction to drugs and alcohol, and his finances were becoming reckless after his career in the music business had begun to unravel. The weight of a critically injured child and a husband coming apart proved too much for the marriage. They divorced in 1983. In her memoir, Joan described the collapse of that union with a painful clarity. She wrote that her intelligent and ambitious husband had ruined his own life and had come close to ruining hers as well. So, she decided it was time for divorce number 3. Becoming Alexis. Triumph in the middle of the storm. What makes Joan Collins' story so striking is that the biggest professional victory of her life arrived during years that also carried deep personal pain, and she still grabbed that moment fully. By the late 1970s, her film career had slowed down. Still, she refused to fade away. Instead, she pushed her own comeback forward with pure boldness and took the lead in The Stud in 1978, a steamy hit based on a novel by her sister Jackie. The film was made for just $600,000, yet it earned more than $20 million around the world. It also led to a 1979 sequel, The Bitch, and brought Collins back as a star audiences would pay to see. This mattered even more, because she was already in her mid-40s, an age when Hollywood often stopped making room for women. In that same period, her autobiography, Past Imperfect, reached #1 on the bestseller list. That comeback soon opened the door to something even bigger. The producers of Dynasty, an ABC soap opera that was struggling badly in its first season, noticed her renewed momentum. In 1981, they cast her as Alexis Carrington, the sharp, glamorous, and dangerous former wife of oil tycoon Blake Carrington, played by John Forsythe. The effect was immediate. The moment Alexis arrived at the beginning of Season 2, the show caught fire. Ratings shot up, and by 1985, Dynasty had become the #1 show in the United States, finally beating its longtime rival, Dallas. Collins appeared in 195 episodes and once again became famous across the world. She did this in her 50s, at a time when Hollywood still held narrow ideas about when a woman's career should slow down. For the role, she won a Golden Globe in 1983 after receiving 6 career nominations, earned a Primetime Emmy nomination, and got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame that same year. Around that time, she also made a bold public statement about glamour and age by posing for a famous 12-page Playboy layout at 50, an age far beyond what the magazine usually featured. It sent a clear message that beauty and desirability did not have to fade at 40. Her power did not stop on screen. Collins had a strong will in every part of her career. She became well known for her sharp and highly publicized on-screen clashes with co-star Linda Evans, who played the gentle Crystal. Reports said that tension carried over into real life as well. At the same time, Collins fought just as firmly behind the scenes. Before the 1985 to 1986 season, she refused to return unless she received a major pay raise. It was a risky move. The previous season had ended with the famous Moldavian massacre cliffhanger, where nearly every major character was shot at a wedding. The producers could have simply decided to kill Alexis off and move on. Collins took that risk anyway, and she won. She secured a reported salary of around $60,000 per episode and was written out of only one installment. Later, during the show's final season, producers said they could no longer afford to pay her every week, so she appeared in only 13 of the 22 episodes. By then, she had turned her value into real leverage. Past 50, she held one of the strongest and most profitable positions on American television, during a period when many actresses her age were quietly being pushed aside. The brutal divorce, Peter Home. While Alexis Carrington battled her enemies in primetime, Joan Collins soon found herself in a very real fight, and it was painful from start to finish. In 1985, at the very height of her Dynasty fame, she married her 4th husband, the Swedish singer Peter Home, in Las Vegas. Very soon, the marriage began to fall apart. By 1986, she was trying to end it, and what followed became a long, exhausting legal war over money. It lasted about 15 months and unfolded in public, with every ugly detail exposed. According to Collins, Home tried to take control of her finances, and the divorce turned into a spectacle. At one point, Home's own mistress reportedly appeared in court and testified about her affair with him. Collins accused him of mistreatment and eventually got a restraining order against him. For a woman who was then one of the most famous people in the world, it was humiliating to have her private life torn apart in courtrooms and tabloids at the same time. She came through it wounded, though still standing, and it left her deeply cautious about marriage for years. By then, she had lived through 4 marriages and 4 painful endings, each leaving its own mark. Maxwell Reed brought violence into her life, and that led into marriage. Anthony Newley brought betrayal. Ron Cass brought addiction and tragedy. Peter Home brought a bitter financial war. After all of that, anyone could understand why she might have closed the door on love for good. Losing Jackie. Through all the marriages, heartbreak, and comebacks, one relationship stayed with Joan Collins through every chapter of her life, and that was her bond with her younger sister, Jackie Collins. Jackie became a hugely successful novelist whose steamy books sold hundreds of millions of copies. The sisters were close, though their bond sometimes carried a competitive edge. Even so, Jackie remained one of the few people who had seen Joan through every stage of her life. Joan had even starred in the film version of Jackie's The Stud, and that collaboration had played a major part in bringing her career back to life. Then, in September 2015, Jackie Collins died of breast cancer at 77. The loss was made even harder by one devastating truth. Jackie had hidden her illness for about 6 years and told almost no one. During that time, she kept writing, promoting her books, and appearing in public while privately living with the disease. Joan reportedly learned how serious the illness really was only shortly before Jackie died. Losing the sister who had been beside her since childhood was already a deep blow. Losing the one person who had shared those frightening nights singing in the underground during the Blitz, and who had seen every triumph and every wound up close, made it even heavier. Then came the pain of learning that Jackie had carried so much of it alone. Since then, Collins has spoken about how deeply she misses her sister, and about the bond they shared, loving, layered, and at times competitive, yet always meaningful. They were two extraordinary women who each conquered the entertainment world in their own way. Jackie's death also brought a quiet truth into focus. Fame, glamour, and strength cannot protect anyone from grief. The happy ending she almost didn't allow herself. After 4 failed marriages, Joan Collins had every reason to believe that chapter of her life was over. Then, around the turn of the millennium, she met Percy Gibson, a theater producer working on a play in which she was starring. He was, and still is, 32 years younger than she is, and that age gap brought the expected gossip, doubt, and laughter from people who were sure the relationship would never last. Collins herself had already decided she would never marry again. Still, as she came to know Gibson, she saw something she had not found in her earlier husbands. He brought steadiness, kindness, humor, and integrity. She later described him in very simple terms as the most honorable man she had ever known. In time, she decided that her rule against marriage no longer felt right. They married in February 2002. More than 24 years later, it has become the longest marriage of her life, and, by every account, the happiest one, too. The great love story arrived after decades of heartbreak, just when she had almost stopped believing in that kind of happiness. Collins has brushed aside the endless comments about their age difference with her usual wit. She has said that age means very little to the two of them, and that anyone who sees them together can recognize how happy they are. Once, when someone asked what she would do if Gibson died first, she reportedly answered with a dry joke, saying, "If he dies, he dies." The line captured something important about her. By then, she had learned not to live in fear of losing happiness. She had reached a point where she could finally enjoy it. That ending feels remarkable when set beside everything that came before. Maxwell Reed, Anthony Newley, Ron Cass, Peter Home. There had been violence, betrayal, tragedy, and bitter legal conflict. After such a long chain of pain, Joan Collins still found lasting contentment. She could easily have decided that love only led to disappointment. Instead, in her 60s, she found something real, and she carried it with her into her 90s. Dame Joan, thriving at 92. By this stage, any attempt to frame Joan Collins's life as a tragedy simply falls apart. Her later years do not read like a sad final chapter. They feel like a long and deserved victory. In 1997, she was appointed an OBE for services to drama. Then, in 2015, Queen Elizabeth II made her a Dame Commander of the British Empire in recognition of her many decades of charitable work, with the honor presented by the then Prince of Wales. Her philanthropy was not shallow or occasional. It was real and lasting. In 1982, she testified before the U.S. Congress to support increased funding for neurological research. Over the years, she also became a committed patron of causes that support children with learning disabilities. At the same time, she kept working. She did not step quietly into retirement, and she never seemed interested in fading into the background. She wrote more than 20 books, including memoirs, novels, and nonfiction, and built a genuine career as a best-selling author in her own right, separate from acting. In 2022, she appeared in the BBC documentary This Is Joan Collins. In 2023, she sat down for a searching interview with Louis Theroux at her private villa near Saint-Tropez. She also continued acting well into her 10th decade, including recurring roles in series such as The Royals and American Horror Story Apocalypse in 2018. In July 2025, she teamed up with Marks & Spencer to launch a Joan Collins bouquet. In December 2025, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Women in Film and Television International Awards. In January 2026, she both starred in and produced the mystery film A Murder Between Friends, playing a television star who becomes an amateur detective. Then, in June 2026, she was honored with the Icon of the Year award at Variety's Power of Women event in London, where she shared the stage with a younger generation of leading actresses. She had even been filming a biopic in which she played Wallis Simpson, with shooting taking place in London and Paris. At 92, she was still talking cheerfully about sequels and future work, while relaxing on a sun lounger in the south of France, joking that she was deciding on her next move or her next movie. Her charity work continued beside all of this. It was not some footnote added later. It ran through her life in steady fashion. She had spoken before Congress in 1982 to support neurological research funding, and she had spent many years helping causes that serve children with learning disabilities, eventually receiving that foundation's highest honor. This is a woman who did not simply live off old fame. She kept working, she kept creating, she kept receiving new honors. She remained, very clearly, in the center of public life. That is why the idea of pity does not fit here. Joan Collins's later years tell a very different story, and it is one of endurance, relevance, and joy.